Hi, my name is Toby Pierce, and I'd like to share a devotional thought with you today. We're continuing our journey through the book of Acts, and this time we're in Acts 27. If you remember, last time we were in the last part of Acts 26, where Paul is before King Agrippa and Governor Festus. And King Agrippa kind of takes Festus aside and says, this man, talking about Paul, this man could have been set free if he had not appealed to Caesar. And so that finds us then in chapter 27, beginning in verse 1. And when it was decided that we should set sail for Italy, the we here, so it means that Luke is again with Paul, being able to travel with him here. And when it was decided that we should sail for Italy, they delivered Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius. And embarking in a ship of Adramyttium, which was about to sail to the ports along the coast of Asia, we put to sea, accompanied by Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica. The next day, we put in at Sidon. The general feeling here from commentators is that this Aristarchus was probably a friend of Paul's, being allowed to accompany them, just the way that it's mentioned. So next day we put in at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul. Remember, Julius is the centurion. Treated Paul kindly and gave him leave to go to his friends and be cared for. Remember, Paul began this journey at Caesarea Maritima, and Sidon was roughly 85 miles north of there, so they'd sailed 85 miles. People came from Sidon, remember, to hear Jesus in Luke 16 and Luke chapter 6 and verse 17. And Jesus went to that region in Matthew 15 and verse 21. Well, so Paul had friends there that cared for his needs. And Luke calls the centurion by name, Julius. Julius seems to be a fairly kind person overall. Even though Luke is not a prisoner, he's allowed to accompany Paul. So Acts 27, verse 4. And putting out to sea from there, we sailed under the lee of Cyprus, because the winds were against us. The lee side of an island, in this case Cyprus, is the protected or downwind side, the side shielded from the force of the wind. So the wind was trying to blow the ship in the opposite direction of where they wanted to go. Verse 5. And when we had sailed across the open sea, along the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra in Lycia, where the centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing for Italy, and put us on board. We sailed slowly for a number of days and arrived with difficulty off Cnidus. And as the wind did not allow us to go farther, we sailed under the lee of Crete off Salome, coasting along it with difficulty. We came to a place called Fair Havens, near which was the city of Lasea. Verse 9. Since much time had passed, and the voyage was now dangerous, because even the fast was already over. Well, this gives us some more insight as to exactly when the voyage is taking place. The fast is a reference to the Day of Atonement. You can read about the Day of Atonement in Leviticus 23, 26 through 32, Leviticus 23. In part of that passage, it says, you shall afflict yourselves and present a food offering to the Lord. Well, the Jews took that to mean that you are to fast. And from Josephus we learn that the Day of Atonement became known as the fast because it was the only required fast during the year. The Day of Atonement on our calendar happens in late September or early October. The Hebrew months begin with a new moon, and so the days kind of shift somewhat. The dates do, but that lets us know that this is late in the year. So when they start talking about where they want to spend the winter, well, that all makes sense then. So continuing the rest of verse 9 there, Paul advised them, saying, Sirs, I perceive that the voyage will be with injury and much loss, not only of the cargo and the ship, but also of our lives. But the centurion paid more attention to the pilot and to the owner of the ship than to Paul. Well, you have to give the centurion Julius a break here. I mean, we know that Paul was being guided by the Holy Spirit. I mean, we know that. But Julius did not know that, and for him to pay more attention to the pilot and to the owner of the ship than to what one of the prisoners was saying, well, from his point of view, that just kind of makes sense. Verse 12, and because the harbor was not suitable to spend the winter in, the majority decided to put out to sea from there on the chance that somehow they could reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete, facing both southwest and northwest, and spend the winter there. Well, here's a time when the majority was wrong. It was not safe to put out to sea. Here also, people tend to make a kind of a joke about wanting to spend the winter in Phoenix, because in the United States, a lot of people do that. They go down to Phoenix, Arizona, to spend the winter. But this was a whole different Phoenix, but this would have been a fairly safe place to spend the winter if they could make it there. Verse 13. Now when the south wind blew gently, supposing that they had obtained their purpose, they weighed anchor and sailed along Crete, close to the shore. But soon a tempestuous wind, called the nor'easter, struck down from the land. Now you can tell that the wind is going to be kind of rough when it has its own name. And when the ship was caught and could not face the wind, we gave way to it and were driven along, running under the lee of a small island called Cauda. We managed with difficulty to secure the ship's boat. Now they're talking about what we would consider kind of a lifeboat, a little dinghy kind of thing that they're pulling along. After hoisting it up, they used supports to undergird the ship. Then, fearing that they would run aground on the Syrtis, they lowered the gear, and thus they were driven along. Now, if you look up Syrtis, it's Syrtis. If you look that up on a map or you Google it, you'll see that it was an area off of northern Africa, kind of west of Cyrene. Well, it was shallow water with shifting sandbars, and it was dangerous for ships. It was also a very long way from where they were wanting to go, as they hoped to sail to Rome. Okay, verse 18. Since we were violently storm-tossed, they began the next day to jettison the cargo. And on the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope of our being saved was at last abandoned. The sailors start throwing necessary items overboard to lighten the ship so that it'll rise up higher in the sea and not take on as much water from the waves that are crashing against it. You know, priorities change when you are needing to be saved. You know, Jesus said in Matthew 16 and verse 26, "For what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul?" Well, these folks, these sailors, were thinking about physical life here, but there's a similar thought, that they were willing to give up everything to be saved. Verse 21, "Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul stood up among them and said, 'Men, you should have listened to me and not have set sail from Crete and incurred this injury and loss. Yet now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For this very night there stood before me an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I worship. And he said, Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar. And behold, God has granted you all those who sail with you. So take heart, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as I have been told. But we must run aground on some island." Paul knows what's going to happen, and the people on the ship are beginning to listen to him. We're going to find out a little bit later that there are 276 people aboard this ship. It was a huge vessel. And the language there sounds like Paul had been praying for these people, because it says that God has granted you all of those who sail with you. So nobody's going to die. Next time we do see, though, that there is indeed going to be a shipwreck. So that's going to be interesting too. Paul introduces God to them as the God to whom I belong, verse 23. You know, Paul wrote to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 6 and 19, says, "Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God?" And he says, "You are not your own, for you were bought with a price. So glorify God in your body. You are not your own. You were bought with a price." God owns us. He takes care of us. The price God paid for you was the highest price that could ever be paid. That is how precious you are to God. You should find comfort in knowing that God gave everything to have you. I hope you have a blessed day.
If you would like more information, or if you'd like to participate in our Bible studies and worship services, we would love to have you come join us at the Northeast Church of Christ in Albuquerque, New Mexico.